I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now. And I want you to know that I am not a hero in this at all. And President Trump is a hero.
We had some reach out several days ago. People approached us, me in this case, and said that there might be an opportunity to get Mark Fogel out. I talked to the president, his national security advisor, his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, and John Radcliffe, and the president directed me to go over there and complete it if we could. And that's what happened. We ended up, thank God, with a good result.
Did you meet with Vladimir Putin?
I don't want to talk about that right now. I think this should be much more about the president, what happened in the first 2.5 weeks of his presidency, this opportunity. Mark languished there for 3.5 years, and he shouldn't have. He should have been out, before. But he's out now. His family's grateful. He is as happy a human being as you're going to find, as the country will find out. Mm-hmm. And he's extraordinarily grateful to the president, our president, President Trump, and also to President Putin and everybody else who played a role in this.
It is wonderful that he is home, and he was there for far too long. But why isn't it important whether or not you spoke to Vladimir Putin?
I'm not saying it's important or it's not important. I'm just saying it's just not something that I'm going to talk about right now.
Who is being released in exchange? What is the identity of the Russian individual in the United States, if there is one, that will be released?
Well, I think whatever's going to happen, we'll know it later today. And I guess there's been some hints at it. I'm not really familiar with it, but I'm sure we'll all know about it soon.
Politico reporting it might be Alexander Vinnik, who is I guess they say a Russian crypto guy who pled guilty to money laundering charges. Does that sound right to you?
It's not. That's not something I'm familiar with, so I don't want to comment.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says it wouldn't be a one-for-one exchange, but if there is a Russian individual being released, isn't that a one-for-one exchange?
Again, I'm not trying to be obstreperous with you. I'm just more saying that I'm familiar with what happened yesterday. I'm familiar with Mark Fogel and everything that all that we discussed on the plane, and that's what I'm here to comment on. And I'm happy to tell you more if that's what you want to talk about.
I believe me, I'm asking a lot of questions about the Mark Fogel exchange, which I think is of extreme interest to the American people, especially because what it might mean going forward. Do you believe there will be more Americans released, and in exchange for what?
Well, John, I would say to you that the president's policy on Americans that are held abroad is that we leave nobody behind. It's very, very similar to the military credo. Leave nobody back on the battlefield. And that's how he feels. And so I think that you'll see a president who is extraordinarily proactive in seeking all hostages to be released who are being held in foreign countries. That's what Adam Boehler does. He's the special envoy in that sector, and I think you're beginning to see a lot of results. There are people who have been held for far too long, and people haven't paid attention to them in prior administrations, and that's not going to be the way that the Trump administration works, and that's at the direction of President Trump.
So your day job in connection with the Trump administration is as special Middle East envoy. And yesterday, President Trump met with King Abdullah of Jordan. This is after saying that Jordan was going to accept Palestinians from Gaza. King Abdullah put out a statement after that meeting and said, "I reiterated Jordan's steadfast position against the displacement of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. This is the unified Arab position. Rebuilding Gaza without displacing the Palestinians and addressing the dire humanitarian situation should be the priority for all." So why wasn't the president able to convince King Abdullah to accept the Palestinians in a move that seems to be a key part of his plan to take ownership of Gaza?
Well, John, normally I would have been there, but I was on a plane with Mark Fogel, so that prevented me from being there. But I would say this. I would say that the president has been very clear. He cares about the Palestinian people. what he also cares about is that we don't repeat the same mistakes we've made for the last 5 decades. So we've rebuilt Gaza, destroyed it, rebuilt it, destroyed it, and I don't know how many times that's happened. And the president is focused on a much different and more cogent pathway. He believes in the Palestinian people having a better place to live, having hope and aspirations for a better life for them and their children, what every parent would want. And going back to a place that's going to take anywhere between 10 and 20 years to successfully and correctly and efficiently redevelop it makes no sense at this point in time. That is his policy, and candidly, I agree with it, and so do many responsible people. You would never, if there was this sort of destruction in any major city in the United States, no one would be allowed to cross the dividing line and go back in and because it's inherently dangerous there. There's unexploded munitions all over the place, dangerous latent conditions, and it's I was there. I went there personally to inspect, so this is not secondhand information. I actually was in the tunnels. I've seen how much destruction there is. Something needs to be done, a different approach, and President Trump is focused on a different approach that will work.
We're all overjoyed with the return. What I can tell you about him is we saw him late last night after he was with the president. He was in great spirits, but he's always been in high spirits, even throughout the 3.5 years of detention. We had the ability to communicate with him from time to time, and every time he was optimistic. He was, as you know, passed up in 3 prisoner swaps in the Biden administration, which is unprecedented. And the last swap that he was passed up on, which was August 1st last year, when the Russians released Russian dissidents, green card holders, and some Americans, but left, Mark was left behind. He was pretty devastated, and even after that, which is enduring a lot of psychological pain, he managed to not lose hope. So you can imagine that when they came in to the penal colony and pulled him out and drove him to Moscow, he didn't know what was happening, but he knew it was a good sign, and that we were getting very, very close. And then you could see yesterday, when he was with the president, how amazing his spirit, his personality, his character is, and how strong he was mentally to get through all of that.
The big question is, what are the terms of the deal that was able to bring Mark home? The Kremlin says that a Russian citizen is being released as part of the terms of the deal to secure Mark's release to bring him home. Do you know who it is?
I'm not really at liberty to discuss that. That's, I think, something for the White House to talk about. What I can tell you is that we advocated really hard during the transition. What we understood from the dialogue that was going on behind the scenes, and we worked with the Russian lawyers on this at EPAM, and Dmitry Afanasyev was incredible at helping to maintain a channel of communication during a period of time when U.S.-Russia relations were really difficult. But throughout that time, what we were seeing was that the U.S. government was not necessarily prioritizing Mark's release for a variety of reasons, and that had to change. So what's amazing about this is that for 3 years, over 3 years, Mark, despite bipartisan support in Congress, had not been designated wrongfully detained. The Biden administration had produced a number of excuses for why that couldn't happen. He didn't meet the criteria, we're relying on classified information, blah, 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 blah. The facts are that the day after the election, the family received the official notification that Mark had been designated wrongfully detained. And that's when we realized the next 2 months of transition, not much is going to happen with this administration. And so we started advocating really strongly and pushing the idea that Mark had been left behind in 3 swaps, inexplicably, honestly. That the tone was going to change, the conversation was going to change with President Trump, and that this was an opportunity, probably once in 100 years, that to improve U.S.-Russia relations and bring it back from the brink. And so this would be a good reason to get the relationship started in a different way. That somehow and through various ways, it seems like the message was well received, and the governments got talking to each other, right, in a constructive way. And the result, the first result of that, I think, is yesterday.